We'd like to thank Jesse from True Footy for collaborating on and voicing this video. He's less than 1,000 subs away from 10k, so for weekly tips, podcasts and more, follow the link in our description to his channel and hit that subscribe button.
Subiaco Oval, 2005, the first AFL qualifying final, West Coast versus Sydney. As a one-off, this match was incredible, a fitting way to launch the 2005 final series. Facing a 14-point deficit at three-quarter time, a thrilling last quarter saw the Eagles claim the lead late before two intercept marks by Dean Cox in the dying moments sealed a 4-point Eagles victory. The story of that game, though, would extend far beyond just that night. It stands as a first in a series of matches that spawned one of the AFL's briefest yet most intense rivalries. The next 5 games between the teams would never see the margin extend beyond 4 points and were headlined by 2 nail-biting grand finals. The season leading up to that 2005 qualifier had almost belonged to West Coast. The Eagles won their first 8 games, claiming top spot in round 4 and stayed there almost all year until their form declined in the closing rounds and a loss to Adelaide in the last game of the season allowed the Crows to swoop on top spot. The Eagles' dominance was reflected too on Brownlow night, when star mid Ben Cousins won the medal ahead of Daniel Kerr by a single vote to secure the top 2 spots. In the home preliminary final that followed, a rematch with the Crows awaited. This time, 5-1 in the third quarter gave the Eagles revenge and sent them to the club's 4th grand final since entering the league in 1987. Sydney, meanwhile, had steadily built their 05 campaign. It took 11 rounds for them to lock down a spot in the top 8, but they finished strongly, winning 7 of their last 8 games to climb into 3rd place. This secured a 3rd consecutive finals appearance on the club's quest to break a premiership drought that had grown to 72 years. After losing that qualifier to West Coast, the Swans returned home to play an equally close and perhaps even more memorable semi-final against Geelong before storming past St Kilda at the MCG to set up a rematch with the Eagles. Despite the result of 3 weeks earlier, Sydney went into the match as favourites thanks to their impressive prelim performance and captain Barry Hall controversially escaping suspension at the tribunal. A second classic followed. Sydney controlled much of the first half and were aided by their opponents' inaccurate goal kicking to take a 20-point lead into half-time. Much like their previous meeting, however, West Coast lifted in the third and by the 4th quarter they'd wrestled back the lead. This time the Swans were able to answer back. Eamon Buchanan kicked the game's final goal to put Sydney in front before Leo Barry U-Star became a household phrase. The Swans defender leapt back into a pack to take a match-winning intercept mark, securing a famous 4-point win for the Swans and ending the league's longest premiership drought. Astonishingly though, the best these teams would have to offer was yet to come. For the Eagles, the defeat was stinging, but one that motivated them for redemption the following year. Despite their off-field controversies, they started 2006 like a team on a mission, winning 10 of their first 11 games, the only blemish a derby loss to Fremantle. It wasn't until round 15 that fans were treated to the grand final rematch, back at Subiaco Oval. In their own lead up to this match, the Swans had started their premiership defence slowly, winning just 1 of their first 4 games. By the time they travelled to Perth, they were sitting just inside the top 8. As was becoming a pattern in these matches, Sydney got out to an early lead, but a 6-1 second half stole the win for the Eagles, with Tyson Stenglein putting his side in front as a diving lunge in the goal square from Craig Bolton made contact with the ball just over the line. The Eagles claimed revenge with a 2-point win. This was now 3 games in a row that had been decided by less than a goal, and while the matches themselves had been tense, they weren't being played as a goal-for-goal arm wrestle, but rather characterised by dramatic swings of momentum. The individual styles of each team offer clues as to why this was the case. Paul Roos' Swans of the mid-2000s will forever be remembered for their drought-breaking heroics, but they also had a reputation as a team that played ugly football, largely thanks to the CEO of the AFL itself. After their slow start to the 2005 season, Andrew Demetrio had criticised the Swans on Triple M. "I don't like at all the way they're playing. I think they've been described as ugly. Unless the Swans change that style of play, they won't win many games." That style was high pressure, physical play with an emphasis on winning back possession as soon as the ball was lost. As a result, Sydney games averaged the most stoppages in the league. The stoppages were a result of the opposition getting the ball, and we had someone on them, so they got tackled, Roos explained. Tough, physical star players like Jude Bolton and Brett Kirk suited this hard-nosed style, while players like Adam Goodes and Nick Davis could provide brilliance when it was needed. While in possession, the Swans' methodical ball movement became known as tempo football, deliberately slowing the game by chipping the ball laterally when they needed to prevent the opposition gaining momentum. When going forward, they would often grind their way to the front half of the ground, then look to hit Barry Hall or Michael O'Loughlin on the lead, favouring chip kicks inside 50 over bombing the ball long. Roos disputed that his team's game style was inherently ugly, instead defending the tactics in a 2010 appearance on Mike Sheehan's show Open Mic by referencing the grand final win. How many goals were kicked in 2005? I think you were quoted as saying it's one of the best grand finals you ever went to see. However, he also acknowledged it was not his job to play visually pleasing football. My philosophies come from what wins. I don't think there's ever been a coach reappointed because their team looks pretty. The Eagles game, however, rightfully centred on a group of midfielders that had elite speed and explosiveness, with one of the league's best ruckmen to supply them. While they would play a pure style of fast attacking football in 2005 that worked to their players' strengths, the tactical nuance was not at the same level as Sydney. There's more strategy in this Sydney team than there is in the Eagles, the commentators had remarked on Grand Final Day, a day when Chris Judd's individual brilliance had won him the Norm Smith medal, while Sydney's team-oriented style won them the match. When it worked, they looked great, but when sides like Sydney were able to shut them down, they would struggle to score. Coach John Worsfold also had an incredibly versatile crop of players at his disposal. Adam Hunter in particular could slot into key position roles either forward or back, while guys like Andrew Embley and Dave Wirapunda could be used on virtually any line. It was common for players to be shuffled around mid-game when the team needed a change, with Hunter's late move to the forward line in the 05 Grand Final almost seeing the Eagles snatch victory. When you counter this fluid, fast-running game style with the Swans' emphasis on controlling the ball, you inevitably end up with matches that would often flow back and forwards depending on who held the momentum. A decisive tweak in West Coast tactics, however, would come during 2006. But before explaining that, the timeline needs to be advanced slightly. After defeating Sydney, the Eagles' redemption tour continued smoothly, and another bemusing loss in the second derby of the season wasn't enough to prevent them from claiming the minor premiership. Meanwhile, Sydney continued to be solid, having smashed Carlton in round 22, snatching 4th spot ahead of Collingwood and St Kilda on percentage. And so, the Swans set up another qualifying final showdown with the Eagles in Perth. Given recent history, the anticipation surrounding this game was electric. The game's newest rivalry was about to go to a whole new level. Sydney led by as much as 22 during the third quarter before the Eagles reduced the margin to 3 points at the final break. The teams then traded goals for 3 each in the last, a sequence which ended with Michael O'Loughlin kicking his 4th before letting the West Coast cheer squad know all about it. The Swans held on to win the game by 1 point, dealing a major blow to an Eagles redemption tour that had seemingly been storming towards a premiership. While the Swans put their feet up the next week, West Coast demolished the Bulldogs by 74 points, but it was their next assignment that posed the more daunting task. To make the grand final, they'd have to defeat the Adelaide Crows at Football Park. In a period of AFL football dominated by non-Victorian teams, the 05-06 Crows are a great team that has been largely forgotten. Finishing on top of the ladder in 2005 and then second in 2006, they failed to make the grand final on either occasion, and while the away prelim was a tall order for the Eagles, they would have taken confidence from the previous encounter between the two teams. We've established this West Coast team was fast and dynamic, but during the 2006 season, John Worsfold decided the game plan needed a slight but decisive tweak. It was back in the round 17 match against Adelaide that he had chosen to unleash it. The idea was simple. The Eagles were going to handball as much as they could, using every available opportunity to run the ball through the middle of the ground. It worked dramatically well. They handballed 227 times and kicked 26 goals, thumping the then first place Crows by 82 points. The week before, they'd recorded just 132 handballs in a loss to Collingwood. The prelim proved to be a lot closer than that round 17 match, but the end result was the same. The teams had roughly the same amount of kicks, West Coast 210, Adelaide 212, but the Eagles almost doubled their opponents' handballs 181 to 98 and overcame a 21-point halftime deficit to win by 10 points. Meanwhile, Sydney defeated Fremantle to set up a repeat of the previous grand final. The Eagles got off to a flyer with the first 3 goals, while Barry Hall missed from 20 metres out. Adam Hunter started forward and then went back, whereupon did the opposite, and by halfway through the second, the West Coast handball chains were causing chaos. Quinton Lynch, who'd missed the year before, kicked 2 goals in a row, both from West Coast players running through the centre of the ground. The Eagles led by as much as 29 before taking a 25-point lead into the main break. The match, however, was far from over. A pair of spectacular run-down tackles by the Swans opened the second half as they began to block West Coast out of the corridor. A classic Sydney chip forward found Nick Davis, who goaled from 55 metres out to get the margin back to 11 at the final change, and a goal from that year's Brownlow medalist, Adam Goodes, 14 seconds into the last quarter, made it 1 goal and put the MCG on a knife's edge. 16 agonising minutes passed before Adam Schneider broke the deadlock and closed the margin to 1. The teams traded goals again to keep the margin at 1 before a long kick forward brought the Swans under pressure 50 metres out from their goal. Amidst the chaos, Daniel Chick brilliantly smothered an attempted clearance, then shepherded Adam Hunter's path to goal as he ran in and gave the Eagles a 7-point lead that would prove to be just enough. Nick Malcheski gave the Swans hope with a late goal, and as the seconds counted down with the margin a single point, the commentary box remarked, "If you took 2 teams over a 2-year period to play this tightly, that has never happened in the game of football before." When the siren sounded moments later, Anthony Hudson's emphatic "Who would have thought the sequel would be just as good as the original" ended the call of the first grand final to be won by a point since St Kilda in 1966. The Swans had out-tackled the Eagles 69 to 53, and the Eagles had out-handballed the Swans 175 to 111. John Worsfold's game plan had delivered his side a premiership. "The satisfaction I have is the medal Chris Judd wears around his neck this year compared to the one last year," he said post-match. After 5 crazy matches, the result was one taste of premiership glory for each side, which Paul Roos would later say was a fair result for both football clubs. The rematch was set for round 1 the next year, a game that is largely overlooked in the scheme of the rivalry but was no less intense. A lunging Daniel Kerr tackle in the dying minutes was enough to halt a late comeback and secure another 1-point win for the Eagles in Sydney, the 3rd match in a row between the 2 teams decided by a single point. The match at Subiaco, however, would break the trend. The Eagles won by a whopping 12 points and the teams wouldn't meet in the finals as they had both exited without winning a match. Round 4 of 2008 confirmed the era was well and truly over, the Swans winning by 62 points as a set of Victorian powerhouses emerged to challenge the dominance of their interstate rivals and claim the next 5 premierships. Chris Judd would famously leave the Eagles to play for Carlton in 2008, but called these epic matches the greatest moments of my football career. With a combined margin of just 13 points, these 6 games of football will remain entrenched in the game's folklore forever.